a glimmer in the dark. Imagine being stripped of everything, not just your home and career, but your name itself, replaced by a number that becomes your only identity. Imagine your family, your loved ones, torn from you, their fates a horrifying mystery. Your dignity is erased, your humanity questioned, and every waking moment is a fight against starvation, disease, and the absolute certainty of violence. This is not a thought experiment. This was the lived reality for prisoner 119,104. But this particular prisoner was different. He was a psychiatrist, and in the deepest darkness imaginable, he began to see a flicker of light, a profound secret about the human spirit. His name was Viktor Frankl, and he survived the horrors of Auschwitz and other concentration camps. What he discovered there would not just save his own life, it would become the foundation of a revolutionary psychological approach. Forged in the crucible of unimaginable suffering, his philosophy holds a key to finding meaning not in spite of your struggles, but directly through them. The question the experience of Frankl leaves for every one of us is this: when all is taken from you, when every external reason for hope is gone, what is left? How can anyone find a reason to keep living? The answer to that question is what we are here to explore. It is an answer that feels just as urgent today, in our own world of quiet anxieties, as it was in the barbed wire hell of the Holocaust. The unraveling of the soul. To grasp the power of what Viktor Frankl found, we first have to understand what he was up against. We have to try and comprehend the reality of the concentration camps, not as a historical footnote, but as a systematic unraveling of the human soul. Upon arrival, the first thing taken was identity. Frankl, a respected neurologist from Vienna, simply ceased to exist. In his place stood a number. This was the first step in a calculated process of dehumanization. Frankl watched as a terrifying psychological state took hold of the prisoners, a pervasive, soul-deep apathy. It was a necessary armor. When you are surrounded by constant death and brutality, the mind has to build a shell to keep from shattering. You stop feeling. The sight of a friend being beaten, the news of another transport to the gas chambers, the gnawing pain in your own stomach, it all fades into a gray, monotonous backdrop of horror. Frankl described it as a kind of emotional death. This numbness was vital for short-term survival, but it came at a terrible price: the loss of the inner self. Life was reduced to its most primitive state. The primary drives were no longer love, or ambition, or curiosity, but the desperate, all-consuming need for a crust of bread, a moment of warmth, a way to avoid the gaze of a cruel guard. Frankl wrote about how conversations in the barracks, even among the most educated men, revolved almost entirely around food. Fantasies of cakes, feasts, and simple meals. Their entire spiritual energy was consumed by the most basic survival instincts. In this world, hope was a dangerous thing. To hope for liberation was to set yourself up for crushing disappointment, day after day. Many fell victim to a kind of desperate optimism, the irrational belief that at the very last second, they would be saved. But as the days bled into weeks, and then years, that belief would often shatter, and with it, the will to live. Frankl noticed a grim pattern. A prisoner who lost faith in the future was doomed. The man who saw no purpose left in his existence would soon refuse to get up for morning roll call, would turn away his meager rations, and within days, he would be gone. His body gave up because his spirit already had. This was the ultimate problem Frankl faced, both as a prisoner and as a psychiatrist. In a world meticulously designed to extinguish all meaning, how do you convince a soul to stay alive? The inner spark of survival. As a trained observer of the human psyche, even amidst the despair, Frankl started to notice something extraordinary. He saw a clear line forming between those who survived and those who succumbed, and it had almost nothing to do with physical strength. The difference was internal. It was a quality of spirit. He often quoted the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, a phrase that would become the cornerstone of his entire philosophy. He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. This was not just a poetic idea. For Frankl, it was a clinical observation, proven in the most extreme laboratory on earth. The prisoners who held on to life were those who held on to a purpose, a reason that was bigger than their daily suffering. They had something to live for. This why could take many forms. For some, it was the burning hope of being reunited with a loved one. Frankl himself clung to the image of his wife, holding vivid, imaginary conversations with her during the brutal marches to work sites. He had no idea if she was alive or dead, but the love he held for her, her image in his mind, became an inner sanctuary that no guard could touch. For others, the why was a task left unfinished. Frankl, for instance, had a scientific manuscript that the Nazis had taken from him. His deep, driving purpose was to survive so he could rewrite and publish his work. This mission gave his suffering a context. It was not just pointless agony, but an obstacle to overcome in service of a greater goal. Even in the smallest moments, this search for purpose made a difference. Some found meaning in helping another prisoner, sharing their last crumb of bread, or offering a kind word. These tiny acts of decency were acts of rebellion against the dehumanizing logic of the camp. Others found meaning in moments of unexpected beauty, like a sunset over the Bavarian mountains, glimpsed through the slats of a cattle car. These moments were proof that a world existed beyond the barbed wire, a world where beauty and goodness had not been completely extinguished. What Frankl saw was that those who focused their minds on a future goal were able to place their suffering into a larger story. The pain did not vanish, but it became bearable because it was just one chapter, not the end of the book. They understood, on a primal level, that their life had a unique meaning that only they could fulfill. This single observation was the seed from which the work of his life would grow. The search for what truly matters. After his liberation, Frankl did not just write a memoir. He systematized his observations into a new school of psychotherapy he called logotherapy. The word logos is Greek for meaning, and this is the crucial element that sets the work of Frankl apart. At the time, psychology was largely defined by two forces. Sigmund Freud had argued that the primary human drive is a will to pleasure, that we are all fundamentally seeking to satisfy our instincts. Alfred Adler countered that it was a will to power, our need to strive for significance. But Frankl, having witnessed humanity at its absolute worst and its most noble, proposed a third, more fundamental drive, the will to meaning. He argued that the deepest, most powerful motivation in the human life is not the pursuit of happiness or power, but the search for a purpose. We are beings who need to feel that our lives, our struggles, and our existence count for something. Happiness, he said, is not something you can chase directly. It is a byproduct. Happiness and even success must happen, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of the dedication of a person to a cause greater than oneself. If you aim for happiness, it will elude you. But if you dedicate yourself to a meaningful purpose, happiness may just find you along the way. But what happens when this will to meaning is frustrated? Frankl diagnosed this condition as the core sickness of the modern age, the existential vacuum. It is that feeling of inner emptiness, of boredom and apathy, the sense that life is ultimately pointless. He saw it in its most extreme form in the camps, but he also saw it spreading through the affluent, peaceful societies of the post-war world. People had more comfort and more freedom than ever, yet they were suffering from staggering rates of depression, addiction, and aggression. Why? Because the old structures that once gave life meaning, like tradition, community, and strong faith, were beginning to fade. People tried to fill this inner void with frantic work, with the pursuit of wealth, with fleeting pleasures, or by just doing what everyone else is doing. But these are temporary patches. The aim of logotherapy is to help people find their own unique meaning, to fill that vacuum from the inside out. It operates on a single, powerful belief. Life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable ones. 3 roads to purpose. So, if our deepest drive is to find meaning, how do we actually do it? Frankl did not leave this as some abstract question. He laid out 3 primary pathways through which any person can discover meaning. The first path is by creating a work or doing a deed. This is maybe the most direct path. It is found in what we give to the world, our work, our creativity, our acts of service. For Frankl in the camps, it was the manuscript he was determined to rewrite. For an artist, it is the canvas they bring to life. For a parent, it is the act of raising a child. This path is about pouring your energy into a task that is bigger than you are. The second path is by experiencing something or encountering someone. Where the first path is about what you give, this one is about what you receive. Meaning can be found in moments of profound connection. It could be experiencing the quiet awe of nature, or being deeply moved by a piece of music. But most importantly, Frankl says this path is about love. To love another person is to see their deepest essence. For him, the memory and love for his wife was the powerful force that sustained him. This path teaches us that meaning is not just about doing. It is also about our capacity to appreciate the good and the beautiful in the world and in each other. The third path is the most profound. It is the meaning we find in the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. Frankl is very clear. Suffering in itself is meaningless. If you can remove it, you should. But some suffering we cannot escape, like a painful loss or a serious illness. In these moments, when we can no longer change our situation, we are given one last freedom, the freedom to change ourselves. The meaning here lies in how we choose to bear our burden. We can face our fate with courage and with dignity. Frankl told a story from his later practice about an old doctor who was deeply depressed after his wife died. Frankl asked him, "What would have happened, doctor, if you had died first and your wife had to survive you?" The man replied, "Oh, for her this would have been terrible. She would have suffered." Frankl responded, "You see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared her, and it is you who have spared her this suffering. But now, you have to pay for it by surviving and mourning her." The man said nothing. He simply stood up, shook the hand of Frankl, and calmly left the office. The suffering had not been taken away, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a mark of his loss, but a testament to his love. The last human freedom. This brings us to the final, and perhaps most powerful, lesson from the philosophy of Viktor Frankl. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote one of the most important passages in all of psychology. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is the ultimate freedom. His captors could take his home, his profession, his family, and his name. They could control his environment and starve his body. But they could not control his inner response. They could not dictate how he chose to see his situation. That power, and that power alone, remained his. It is a radical redefinition of freedom. We often think of freedom as being about what is outside of us, the freedom to do what we want, or go where we please. Frankl argues that the most essential freedom is internal. It is the space between stimulus and response. In that space lies our power to choose. The men Frankl saw walking through the barracks comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread, or exercising this ultimate freedom. Objectively, they had nothing, but internally, they chose to be bigger than their suffering. This was not about pretending the horror was not real. It was about acknowledging the horror and choosing to respond with integrity and purpose. It was about finding a way to say yes to life, even when life itself seemed to be a resounding no. This freedom is available to every one of us every day. We cannot always control what happens to us. We will all face setbacks, disappointments, and loss. But we can always control how we respond. We can let hardship make us bitter, or we can allow it to forge us into something stronger and more compassionate. That choice, Frankl teaches us, is the essence of human dignity. It is the one thing that can never be taken away. A final reflection on hope. The philosophy of Viktor Frankl is ultimately a message of defiant hope. It challenges us to stop asking what we expect from life, and instead to ask what life expects from us. Life is constantly posing questions to us, not in words, but in challenges. We answer not with talk, but with our actions and our conduct. In a world that often tells us to seek comfort and avoid pain, the legacy of Frankl is a powerful counter-narrative. He teaches us that suffering, when met with the right attitude, can be transformed into a source of profound strength. He proved that even in the darkest of nights, we have the power to create our own light, not by changing our fate, but by choosing how we meet it. That is our final freedom and our greatest task. The journey of Viktor Frankl offers us a map for navigating our own struggles. His insights are not just for those in extreme circumstances, but for anyone who has ever felt lost or questioned the point of it all. The search for meaning is a deeply personal one, which leads me to ask you, what gives your life meaning? What your why? That helps you bear your how? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might just be the spark of light that someone else needs to see today. If this reflection resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Thought 101 for more explorations into philosophy and the human mind. Share it with someone who might benefit from this message, and be sure to ring the notification bell so you do not miss our next video.